Today we're going to put the QD OLED S95B up against the Samsung Neo QLED QN90B. Both of these are 2022 models and they are different technologies. So we're going to talk about LCD TV versus QD OLED and if QD OLED will bridge the gap between LCD TVs and OLED TVs. I got a lot to talk about on this subject and a lot of you guys might be surprised by some of the results. Before I begin, I just want to let you know I will have the product links for these two TVs that we're talking about today in the description below. It's from multiple retailers, so go ahead and check that out if you guys are interested in buying the TV. It will help out the channel if you use those links. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so right off the bat, let's talk about prices. Now, this is subject to change based on sales, but right now we're looking at $18.99 for the 55-inch QN90B, and for the 55-inch S95B, we're looking at $21.99. This is a $300 difference, so this is a really close battle. If this is something you're considering, listen up very closely. Now in this video, I will not be doing a bright room test. I'll probably make a separate video for that because I wasn't able to get my room as bright as I want to. The sun just was not out today. And so with that said, I want to say that I'm going to lean towards the QN90B for those early results. I think that the QN90B is going to be perfect for a bright room if you are in a very bright room. Now, those of you that are in a moderately lit room, you only have a little bit of sunlight coming in, or it's just a semi-bright room in general, I think you could get away with the QD OLED. Now, whether or not that's what you're going to want, that's going to be totally up to you. The key differences to these two TVs is the panel and what kind of technology it is. So for the Neo QLED, we're looking at a mini LED LCD TV. And for the S95B, we're looking at a quantum dot OLED TV, self-emissive pixels. So what that means is the TV can individually turn each pixel off, resulting in perfect black. On the other hand, the LCD TV is still going to suffer from a lot of the same LCD weaknesses, though some of those weaknesses are definitely helped by really good local dimming performance, which we will talk about a little bit later. The biggest difference between this TV versus a regular OLED is that the QD OLED will be able to get brighter than the regular OLED, making it closer than ever before, which you will see in this video. Now, the biggest thing that stuck out to me was how close the QD OLED could get with hanging with the mid-range brightness levels. When we got to the highest brightness levels, it was clear the QN90B was still the brightest TV in those situations. I will say though, perceptual brightness, if these TVs are by themselves, it is really easy to mistake the QD OLED for an LCD TV in those situations. Meaning that the perceptual brightness level of the QD OLED is really off the charts. It's something that will stick out in a dark room and in a semi-bright room. To give you an idea of how the brightness of the QD OLED is in comparison to other TVs, I would say it's somewhere in between an LG G2 and the Samsung QN90B, which we are comparing it to today. So it's definitely brighter than the G2, but it can't get to the same level as the QN90B, though I was really surprised at how it did for a lot of gaming scenes and for a lot of movie scenes that can get up to those middle brightness levels. However, when we got to those very high brightness levels, the QN90B was the clear winner once again. Now, when talking about the S95B, you have to talk about its strengths first and foremost. The big strengths for the S95B is the fact that it is a self-emissive technology, and so it can get to that perfect black level. So in darker scenes, it's definitely the king of this war. Now, I want to say the QN90B actually does a really good job in some of the darker scenes. At times, the black levels are so good that you could probably mistaken it for an OLED if you were just to walk into the room. That said though, there are going to be a lot of times where you are in challenging scenes or darker scenes where you might see some blooming. And so that is where the negatives of this TV comes in. So yes, while it has really good black levels, you still do run into some of the LCD TV faults of this TV. Speaking of another LCD TV fault, we have to talk about dirty screen effect. So DSE is going to be part of the LCD panel lottery. Most TVs that you buy that are LCD TVs will have some sort of DSE. It just really depends whether or not you'll notice it in real content or not. So it's one of those things where you kind of just have to roll the dice for and hope you don't get a bad panel. So what about the QD OLED? Do you have to worry about DSE on the QD OLED? While it is possible to get a bad panel, there are so many reports from users and reviews alike that state this is one of the cleanest panels that they've ever seen in an OLED TV. Things that really plagued other OLED TVs in the past was tinting, banding, and some other issues that could result in a very DSE-like effect when you're playing video games or when you're watching regular content. Though it was never as severe as DSE from LCD TVs, it was something that you could definitely notice in regular content. And I can tell you with the QD OLED that I have, there's no screen uniformity issues whatsoever that I can see in regular content. Now, when it comes to contrast, both of these TVs are very excellent at what they do, but the QD OLED is definitely going to be the winner there. Now, that is just because, like I mentioned earlier, it is an OLED TV at the end of the day. So that is where we can see a big difference in a lot of content. So you'll notice that if they're side by side, if you just have the TV on by itself, it's not side by side, I think a lot of people will really love either TV. Moving on, we have to talk about color. Color is a great thing for both of these TVs. Now, I honestly think that the color on the QD OLED is the best color that I've seen in a TV yet. Now, both TVs are probably not very accurate, but when it comes down to it, I do like the color over the QN90B. Just can get to colors that the QN90B can't quite get to, and the same thing goes for OLED TV. It just can't quite get to the QD OLED's colors. So the potential of the color and the color volume, we definitely have to give that to the QD OLED. Though I will say the QN90B does a very good job with color volume as well. I have to stress that the QD OLED is definitely the better TV overall here, because it really does feel like the combination between an LCD TV that's really good and a OLED TV that's also really good. However, it's not a combination of, say, the QN90B's brightness and an OLED TV. It's just not on that level. There is limitations in how bright it can get, and the QN90B can get very, very bright. As you can see in this example on Godzilla vs. King Kong, this scene is very bright on the QN90B. And while this scene isn't muted like it would be on a WRGB OLED, it is definitely dumbed down a little bit because it can't get to the same brightness level. I have to stress that only because these are side by side was I able to pick out the differences here. If they're by themselves, both are going to look spectacular in this scene. In fact, like I said earlier, the QD OLED does have that perceptual brightness. When you do get targeted brightness from those pixels and it gets very bright, it really does stick out. In fact, both of these are very good for these types of big highlights. It's just that the QN90B is going to give you the best highlights. There's no doubt about it, for this scene, I have to give it to the QN90B. It is almost blinding. This next scene was really cool on both TVs as well, again from Godzilla vs. King Kong, but this laser that is coming out of Godzilla's mouth, I'm telling you guys, on the QD OLED, it looks really good with all of this contrast going on. The QN90B is great as well in the scene, but there does feel like a lot more things being lifted and you aren't getting as much contrast, so you're not going to get the same effect as you do on the QD OLED. That said, the highlight is very bright still, and it will be very impressive if you were watching this in a dark room. I'm pretty sure that you would still be very happy with this scene. But I gotta definitely give the win to the QD OLED for this one. So for this next scene, I have to really give the win right away to the QN90B. It looked almost like OLED versus LCD in this scene, so I was really surprised that, well, you still can't get to those same brightness levels as the QN90B on some of those bigger highlights. So I want to say, yeah, there's still room for an HDR TV that is LCD based, especially if you're somebody who doesn't mind just a little bit of blooming in some dark areas. It's not going to be the perfect contrast all the time, but you will be always getting the best highlights. So it's a trade-off, but at the end of the day, it's really going to be up to you on your picture preference. Now, this is the type of scene that is really built for the QD OLED, but I do want to give QN90B its props because it did hold its own in this scene, and I was very impressed. That said, the QD OLED really shined in this example. Now, when you do OLED versus LCD in a scene like this, you will have a better contrast ratio on the OLED TV, but the fire is going to be brighter, more colorful on the LCD TV. But when you're doing QD OLED versus LCD, you're not really getting too much of those drop-offs when we're talking about the color of the fire and also how bright that fire highlight can get. So yes, the QD OLED really is the best of both worlds when we're talking about scenes like this. You are getting both in this example because this wasn't a super high brightness level scene. You are almost getting a similar highlight brightness across the board, and so that's why I gotta give this scene to the QD OLED for sure. Alright, so that was those big highlight movies. What about gaming? How is gaming on both of these TVs? Well, short answer, it's really good on both of these TVs. So I think anybody will be happy with either of these TVs. The QN90B was definitely going to be in the running for my top gaming TV before I saw the S95B. After I saw the S95B, it was a clear choice. That is definitely the best gaming TV that I've ever seen, bar none. And here is why. Not only is it a self-emissive technology that can get almost to the level of LCD TV when we're talking about gaming, but you also have the high likelihood of a very clean panel, which means you don't have to worry about the likelihood of screen uniformity popping up during your gameplay. The other thing is the highlight brightness level. When I tell you it is very close to LCD TV, it is very close to LCD TV, especially in game mode. Most games are mastered at about 1000 nits, so you will see the S95B be able to hold its own with the QN90B most of the time. That said, there are a few games that go beyond that, and the QN90B will look far brighter than the S95B. So while it is very close, the QN90B is still the brighter gaming TV. But you still have to factor in contrast and everything else that goes along with the OLED technology. So while the QN90B does have good contrast, you're going to still run into instances of blooming from time to time. Now, those scenes in the dark can be lifted on the QN90B, which is why the QD OLED is always going to shine in that area. But that's not the only reason the QD OLED really takes the cake here in gaming. It's also the fact that you are dealing with QD OLED technology, which shares the benefit of OLED technology's instant response time. So you get the combination of response time and input lag that is very low. And so you are going to get the best TV for your fast-paced competitive games. Couple that in with the color advantages of the QD OLED and you got yourself the best gaming TV on the market. So what's the better TV at the end of the day? In my opinion, the overall better TV is the QD OLED, but I think a lot of people will still want to buy the QN90B if they are in a brighter room or they watch nothing but bright content. I'm talking about the people who watch a lot of Pixar movies with their family, a lot of nature documentaries, things like that where you're really running into high average picture level scenes. The QN90B is unbeatable in that area. But if you just need the combination of the best TV, well, then you're really going to want to pick the QD OLED because it is the best of both worlds. You get the brightness levels of a mid-range LCD TV, and you get the contrast of an OLED TV, and then you couple that in with some out-of-this-world color that is better than any other TV that I've seen so far, and you got yourself the perfect TV for a lot of people. This is so far the best TV that I have seen in a very long time, and I stand by that. Now, I want to state it is not a very accurate TV, so those that want that accuracy are going to want to lean towards the A95K from Sony in a few weeks. If you guys found this video helpful, please give a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. And if it helps you make your purchase decision, please consider purchasing from one of my links below. And if you want to see how the QD OLED does against the LG C2 or how the C2 does against the QN90B, you can click one of these videos right here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.